Hi everyone, welcome back to Spirit Rescue Talk. I'm host Amy Major and with my co-host Cynthia Maroon and Jordan Start. We are continuing with our second part of the spiritual ascension, the aspects of spiritual ascension. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, the psychological aspect of this, such as self-identity, shadow integration. We do have quite a few stories that we want to discuss. And again, I will be channeling my new guide, Anne, the school teacher from New York, that would like to come in and answer a few questions that Cynthia and Jordan do have. Before we do kind of get into any discussions, we do have a little bit of a disclaimer and things that we'd like to remind our viewers before we get started. Cynthia, would you like to give that information?
Absolutely. I'm all about the self-care and self-responsibility. We're going to talk about all sorts of stuff today, but we're going to say this. We've said it last time. We're going to say it again. Please take good care of yourself. We're going to talk about our own personal experiences. We're not the authority on your life, your experiences. We're just going to give perspectives today, and personal stories. And so I want to make sure that if you are struggling, if we're talking about things, you're like, wow, I really identify with that. Don't ever exclude the need to go and talk to a medical or psychiatric professional that can assist you with what you're struggling with. There's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's responsible. It's responsible to go and to eliminate any other reasons for maybe why you're struggling, because we're going to talk a lot about struggle, because on the ascension process, it's a big part of it. So we just want to encourage you to take good care of yourself.
Perfectly said. Thank you, Cynthia. So we do want to kind of just begin to give you an idea of like what is ascension exactly, because we have it in the title, we talked about it a little bit, but now we're starting to kind of look deeper into it and kind of ask ourselves, what is ascension? Why are we doing this? What's everybody talking about? And most importantly, how that will affect you. And so many years ago, when I started getting involved in the spiritual work, everyone kept talking about the new world and the new energy and, all of us starting to shift into a higher vibration. And so, I was like, okay, this sounds great. Like love, peace, joy, happy, happy, joy, joy. Everyone talks about, how we're all going to be in a state of love. And it all sounded great, but it's like I didn't really understand what it meant, and I didn't know how it was going to shift me, because here I am. I'm ex-military. I'm tough. I'm grounded. I went through a really hard childhood. I'm a little bit of thick skin on me, so I'm not the nicest person in the world. And everyone's talking about love and joy and happiness, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. I wasn't really interested in it as much. I'm more living in a survival state, and I'm living more with just trying to take care of myself. But everyone's like love and joy and peace and serenity and all of these things that sound beautiful and wonderful, but how was I going to get there? So it was really kind of difficult for me to understand it. But I started digging a little bit more and found out that this really is a global and human, but our consciousness, it's a group effort. The state of ascension is something that everyone is doing, whether you're consciously aware of this or not. And what's happened is, just like, you've heard of the astrological charts that we all have. You go to an astrologer, they tell you about your sign and your birth sign, and your rising sign and your moon sign. Our world also has its own astrological chart. And so we're actually moving into the next house, as they would call it. And that house is the Aquarian, the age of Aquarius. We're moving into that. And I believe it's every 25,000 years or so. I don't quote me on that, but it's a long time for us to go from one state to another. And we're actually moving as a collective consciousness into the new house, which is the Aquarius. And what does that bring? That brings awareness. That brings wisdom. That brings new beginnings, starting over, like a freshness, a way of being able to evaluate ourselves as well. So as we move into the age of Aquarius, we're shifting into a new vibrational frequency. And as we shift into this new frequency, we start seeing things differently. Not only are we seeing things differently, we're also elevating our consciousness into a new vibration. Every vibration carries a level of awareness, reality, and information with it. So as we're shifting into a new vibration, we're now being awakened to new awareness that's in that vibration. And that's what ascension means, is new awareness. We are rising, if you're thinking of a higher state of vibration, into this new age of Aquarius, and that opens up channels of awareness and awakens you to more of who you are. That happens because when you shift your vibrational state, you're moving closer to the higher vibration of your higher self. And as you move closer to that, you start integrating more of your higher self into your state of awareness, which opens up many states, many memories, many thoughts and wisdom that your higher self holds that your soul necessarily didn't. So think of awakening like you're awakening from a dream and remembering more of who you are. We do that naturally through this shift of vibration. And so when we say everyone, that's the collective, that's everyone that's on the planet, and the planet itself is ascending into a new vibrational frequency. So as we're shifting, there'll be many changes in state of transition, as we always say. And so on the show, we've been discussing and we'll continue to discuss what can happen during these shifts of moving into a new vibration, what it can do to you, how it can make you feel, how it can affect your environment. And knowledge is to help you through this transition state. And when we do say we're not here to just tell you what to do, we're just here to give you advice. This is through our own personal experience. This is about the information that comes through from various sources and from the spirit world. It's all here to just help guide you so that things are a little easier. Because change isn't always easy. Even if the change means we're moving to something better, change isn't always easy. And especially when it comes to understanding who we are, your own personal identity, our identity as a collective consciousness, our identity as a species, and our identity of being here on Earth. All of this is changing. So, of course, it's going to be a little scary. So, we're here to help any way that we can. And we have a lot that we want to discuss. So, when you do start shifting and when you do start changing, ask questions. Again, we talk about community a lot. We're here for you. We're here to give you any advice that you need. But I know we have our own personal stories that when we started feeling the ascension or when we started feeling pulled in a direction, it's because we've shifted into a new vibration. And that new vibration is trying to now get us more awareness. What does that mean? That means is we're now opening up to new knowledge. We're able to hold more information as we ascend higher. So we're going to feel compelled to learn more things. We're going to be driven, focused, passionate on certain things that we haven't been before because our souls are trying to reawaken and remember what the higher self already knows. So through this process, we will feel like we just want to discuss things or talk about things or study things, and you might be going through that too. But we have our own personal experiences and stories, and I know Cynthia wanted to share some with you.
I did because for me, it's really important that people don't feel alone.
Mm.
And if we're all afraid to talk about it and nobody wants to talk about the messiness of it, then you know secrecy and isolation can be a very dangerous place for some people. And so I want to talk a little bit about what my experiences has been, because if it means that somebody else will have the courage to talk about theirs, or they're able to feel heard or known just through my own storytelling, then I think that's a beautiful thing.
Mm.
And the process is not easy. And I know that Jordan and I had said that before in a previous podcast when we were talking a lot about emotional wound healing and stuff like that. And um, when I started going through this process, it's not like I wasn't spiritual. Like I was very spiritual all along, but I had a very I had put spirituality into a certain category of just goodness, like love, light, goodness, prayer, meditation, the angels, and all of that is true. But that is not the only perspective when it comes to spirituality. There is another aspect to it, and a lot of people call this shadow work or the dark night of the soul, because it's not all just good feelings, right? And this is what Amy was just saying. Sometimes change is hard, even if you're going to a better place, a place. The way my team had presented to me is through music. They communicate a lot with me through music. And there was a lyric in a song that said, I'm a little more hurt, but a lot more free.
Mm.
And that really resonated with me. So my journey began with, like, I'll use an analogy of like a home. Okay. So imagine a house, and my foundation was like my job. The walls were like the roles I played within my relationships. The decor inside were like my hobbies or my projects, everything that I kind of wrapped my identity around. This is me. This is my home. This is the Cynthia house. Okay. Well, it all started to crumble, like a big earthquake occurred. A big spiritual earthquake occurred under this home. And all of a sudden, the foundation was cracked, the walls were falling, the art was just demolished, and
Mhm.
I'm going, this is where I live, this is how I understand myself in the world.
Mhm.
And it all just started to crumble away in various ways. Relationships were changing, jobs were changing, finances were changing, housing locations were changing. And that takes a toll on a person. Those are major life changes. And all while this was going on in the very same year, I was getting pulled to do spiritual work with Amy. I was getting pulled to do this. I tried backing out. Spirit made sure that email didn't get sent, and like everything they could to interrupt me because I was like, I can't handle. What am I doing? Why do I feel like I should be doing this? I knew about Amy from before I had her books, and so I knew of her, but I felt really called to do some training and some work with her. And it was through that, going through that process, that I was able to meet Jordan. And, today I understand why things have happened the way they have more than ever before. But at the time, I was like, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling such a strong pull to do this beyond the logic of the mind? Right.
Mhm.
And then going through learning all this stuff through training and through practice and the spiritual community and friendship with Jordan and all of these kinds of things, that's when the real, what we would call shadow work, started, because I was learning things about myself. Through the training that I did, there were activities that went through doing things that involved self-reflection, meditation, getting to know yourself, getting to know your energy system, clearing your energy system. Those were holding wounds, those energy systems, getting to know these wounds, things that were suppressed surfacing, going through emotional purging, all the while learning about another perspective about spirit and spirituality and myself. And it can be very confronting because it's so different than the first half of my life, you know, everything before that. And I really didn't feel a firm grasp of control, because control is very much linked with self-protection, right? And
Mm-hmm.
on this journey, there's a need to let go and trust. And that's why community is so important,
Mm-hmm.
because you need other people that can say, you're not crazy. This is what I was going through. So, just to give you an example, and then I want to ask Jordan something like, you know, not feeling a shift in change in my perception of myself and who I was, changes in relationships, confusion around developing skills and abilities like intuition, the clairs, all of those kind of things, relationships with spiritual beings. And it was, I wanted assurance, because I didn't have anybody in my regular life that was going through the same thing. So having Jordan there, who was a student at the same time I was a student, who we were working together to work on things for Amy's class or what have you, we were able to have these discussions. And Jordan, can you talk a little bit about what you were going through at that same time
Mm-hmm.
and what you were finding in connecting with me,
Oh yeah.
just from your perspective?
Oh yeah. So I would say like a lot of my journey pretty much emulated what yours was. I almost like to think about it was there was my life before and there's my life after.
Yeah.
Um, I remember I was always the person that was like, I was always trying to work on myself ever since I was a really young kid. Recognized that there was a lot of trauma, but I was always trying to work on myself. And no matter what relationships I would go in, I was always the more healed one. And so I built my identity over that. And coming into this journey, especially doing the work that I do with some of the darkies, they're not willing, or they're not willing to throw punches beneath the belt and to really point out where your wounds are, what you're still kind of holding. I remember I really started the journey probably about 6 to 8 months actually before I met Amy. I noticed the shift. I was in school. I was on my path to do a career that I've wanted to do since I was a kid. And I remember looking at my partner at the time being like, I'm not going to be doing this forever. And he's like, what are you going to be doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I know I'm going to be doing something, but I don't know what it is. And he's like, you've been in school for like 9 years. Like you, a few more years, you could have been a doctor. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to be using this for the rest of my life. Don't ask me what I'm doing, but I feel like there's going to be transferable skills. And oh, I was correct. And I started getting really drawn to paranormal programming, funny enough, and while I was in school. And as I was kind of going along the journey, my mediumship started opening up. So, I was always similar to you, Cynthia. I was always kind of spiritual, but I hadn't really like subscribed to a narrative yet. I always tried to keep an open mind to it a lot of the time. Um, and I remember the moment really stepping into my path. My team was like, hey, we want you to do certain types of work. And after, we resisted it for so long, the moment I accepted it, everything changed. Like it was almost like the moment, someone would even say, like the moment I got in alignment, um, everything shifted. And things that I had thought I had dealt with, realized I hadn't dealt with it as deep as I thought it was. I was still holding it. I was still carrying it. Talking about like the energy and holding those, those wounds. It was definitely coming up. And I was grateful that I had some people in my life, particularly one individual who was going through it with me and was really supportive during that time. But I almost like to think about it as like I was fumbling in the dark and didn't know what I was doing, just trying to survive out here. It was rough, my awakening. And then I got drawn to Amy's class and her books, and then I met you. And being connected with this community provided so much stability in the sense of being able to go to you, being able to go to Amy, being able to talk to the people in the class. I know I did a lot of work with Amy one-to-one because it was rough out here too. Starting trying to learn while you're getting all the darkies poking at you all the time. It was real rough. And I just remember feeling like I wasn't alone anymore because I could talk to people who had similar experiences and similar struggles, even if the way it was presenting wasn't the same. the core messaging was very similar, or the journey itself and what was happening was very similar. I said things that the way that I looked at myself, you mentioned like the house crumbling. Absolutely. I built my identity over the experiences that I had had in my lifetime. The skills that I had learned over time kept me alive during some pretty rough times. And all of a sudden, those things were coming up to the surface and almost telling me, and my team was telling me, and my soul was telling me, you don't need to carry these heavy weights with you anymore on your journey. I would like to think about it like a person backpacking, and as they're going on their journey, they're kind of letting go of like the dead weight a little bit, the things that they don't need to carry with them. And I'm like, this pot has kept me alive these past number of months. What do you mean you want me to get rid of it? What do you mean you want me to get rid of this tent for a new one? Like, this is really scary. The growth and having to let go of the things that we had kept us safe or who we thought we were. And I remember at so many points in the journey, I would get really frustrated and so terrified of becoming somebody that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Being a part of community was so important because I realized we all went through that in some way or another. There was that struggle. And I started transitioning in my awareness of who I thought I was to who I actually was. And I started realizing who I really thought I was, what the things that I thought were really important, yes, was important for me at the time. But then as I was kind of learning and rediscovering myself in a very different way with new perspectives and with the lovely guidance and support of you lovely ladies, but then also wonderful women and men in my life as well, who are giving me new awarenesses, I realized a lot of what I had been subscribing to was not how I felt anymore. But I also didn't know where I was going. So being in the community, and as you mentioned, like the house crumbling and all the walls falling down and then really having to rebuild, I can definitely speak to, is definitely my journey as well in this ascension process. But I will say, despite having to, and it's not just a one-time thing, I noticed. I don't know about you ladies, but it definitely wasn't a one-time thing. Like I was rebuilding that house. We were starting to rebuild walls, and it was like, no, that one's not the right material. Put it back down again. Oh, let's bring it up. Oh, that window. No, wait, that one that you just installed, we don't like that one anymore. Get rid of that one. Like it was this constant rebuilding and then breaking apart, rebuilding, breaking apart to see where the dust would land and to see what, again, we needed to carry forward versus what not. But despite all the struggles, I will say I'm much more happy and confident and secure in the person I am now than the person that I was, because I realized who I thought I was not who I actually was.
Yeah.
And I wanted to passion for that journey for all of us, because it's tough.
It is. And I want to ask Amy about her perspective on identity, but I want to start with just a memory of something that she said. So in the training, I don't remember when it was. We've done lots of work together, but at one point she introduced the perspective where she said, you know, we build our personalities around our wounding.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that is such a good perspective, because I started thinking about all my work with people when I was doing addiction counseling. And I was thinking, very, very true. And I think that in and of itself is one of the, and you echoed that a little bit in what you were saying, Jordan, is that these personality traits helped me survive.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So whether it be I'm controlling, or I know how to navigate toxic people and have a high tolerance and, you know, for bull. And I don't really set the boundaries because that's not really safe because it gets worse. And so I'm more codependent, for example, or whatever the story is for you personally, we build up these personality skills to be able to survive. And, you know, the mind is like super literal. Like why would it ever change anything if it has 100% success rate with survival? Okay. There is a part of you wired to not take risk to survive, right?
Yep.
So when you get on this path, if you are going to heal, it is going to challenge the concept of who you think you are, period.
Oh, yeah.
It is going to challenge that. And that is very confronting. And it's very hard. So what do you have to say about the whole, from your perspective and experience, Aim, about the concept of identity shifting through psychological and emotional ascension?
Well, I think that people first need to understand it's a natural occurrence. Change is inevitable. I mean, I want you to think back to where you were when you were 5 years old. And think of yourself and your identity and who you knew yourself to be at that moment. And hopefully many of us, we were having fun, we were playing, we were understanding who we were in comparison to our community and our groups. And around the age of 5 is when we start moving into more awareness of our identity in social engagements. This is where we start shining and going, this is who I am, this is who I want to be. Around the age of 20 is when you start shifting again and your identity changes and you start looking at yourself as far as where you've been thus far, where you want to go. It's kind of a pivotal moment in your life where you start looking at your future and you start assessing what you need to let go of in order to become who you want to be. So it's the time where we start dumping parts of our identity that no longer serve us. And then you hit the age of 30 where you start bringing on more of your education, your training, your experiences to mold you into your identity as far as what you're going to do going forward. So if you could just take a look at your life from the age of 5 to 30, you're already shifting, growing, changing, and transitioning various stages according to who you need to be to survive in the world. During some of those phases, you might start looking at yourself as an identity of soul living a physical experience. Many people do not. Many people don't even shift into that awareness until they're in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, where they feel more confident in themselves as far as what they came to do, what they wanted to accomplish, and when they feel more settled. They're able to do more self-exploration of who am I really living in this physical experience. And so many people dig deeper into the spiritual experience to understand themselves deeper because they've already learned everything they could about themselves living here in the 3D. And maybe people don't necessarily like who they've become, or maybe they feel as mundane. It doesn't feel like they've become enough. They feel like there's something missing. They've done everything right, but leading up to this point, they're feeling like, there's something more here. I got to dig deeper into to understand more about who I am. And then you have the awakened ones that come into this world that already have a level of understanding of self as a soul. We don't necessarily understand what it all means, what it entails, but we are more aware of ourselves living in a more expanded consciousness beyond this physical experience. And we're trying to now figure out how we're going to play a part in this world to be able to help it awaken to more of who they really are. So we feel pulled and gravitated towards more service-oriented work because we feel like we want to be more helpful to those because we have a better understanding of who we are as a soul. But throughout all of these different forms of identity of yourself, we're going to be shifting and changing and growing and reevaluating and evolving throughout our whole time here on the planet. That's supposed to happen because we're never supposed to just be in one state. We're in constant states of fluctuation, change, and growth. So if you look at it that way, the only thing that's really getting in your way is your attachment to old identities. You're attached to who you used to be because it created a level of safety. We hold on to what makes us feel safe. And again, like Cynthia was saying, when we move and merge into something more of the unknown, we don't feel as safe anymore. So we're going to attach and hold on to things that we already know about ourselves, even when they have outserved us, even though we know they're not who we want to be anymore, or we don't even feel comfortable being that person. We feel compelled to grow. But there's something that stops us. It's that balancing act of holding on to who we are, but embracing who we want to be. And I talked a little bit before in another episode of the in-between. The in-between is that transition, change, and evolution of yourself and your identity. It's that uneasy feeling of who am I really? And that's when we stop and we pause and we calm our mind and just exist in the moment of who we are right now. through our psychological and emotional changes, they will gradually happen. And when we feel that uneasiness, when we feel that fear, we need to go back into that state of calm, that state of awareness of who am I right now. That give us a level of safety, because we don't have to become anything. We don't have to be our past. We don't have to be our future. We just have to be who we are right now. And that brings us back to a place of peace. So throughout whatever stage of change you're in, because change is inevitable, it's going to happen in various stages, physically, spiritually, or mentally. Keep going back to that state of calm and just breathe in, exhale out, exist as a soul living a physical life, and don't feel like you have to figure it all out right now, because we have forever. And if you have forever, what's the rush? So
Yeah.
that's my opinion on
I
that.
have like, and I want to talk about a comparison that really helped me on my journey. And it's personal to me, but I want to offer it because it has to do with the concept of addiction and recovery. And I know that there's a lot of people who've been impacted by addiction, whether that be your own lived experience or loving somebody who's afflicted with an addiction, or you're a service provider, and you assist those that are impacted by addiction.
Right.
But that, I don't think it's a coincidence that that was my entire career before getting to this point when I started really ascending. You can start ascending, like Amy's saying, just through misfortune, like some challenge or difficulty, a separation, a divorce, a motor vehicle accident. Something can occur in your life to shift you that causes that inner reflection, so that you can ascend through wound healing and releasing those concepts, those beliefs, those identities that no longer serve you, and give you the courage to kind of move forward and evolve. And so for myself, when I think about the process of somebody wanting to get into recovery from substance use, to get sober, or to get, some people call it sober and clean, some people call it recovery. Some people don't even identify as being in recovery and just consider them just like not a substance user anymore. It's not here to say you have to be in recovery or not. But the way that what I noticed in doing this for over 20 years with people was I was witnessing the psychological, emotional aspect of spiritual ascension, because there was so much wounding, there was so much trauma from either prior to the addiction or as a result of having the addiction. And it was all compounded and cumulative, one after the other. And I was thinking about, during my own ascension, with the things I would tell people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, so some of the things that would come to mind that I kept reaffirming for myself, because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be someone who just tells everybody how they should be or give them helpful tips on how to go and not apply it to myself.
Yeah.
That's a big part of having integrity and being honest, and that's very important to me. And so I was thinking about some of these concepts around, for example, we talk about in recovery, people, places, and things. Well, that's what shifted for me. People, places, and things were shifting over and over again, like Jordan had mentioned, cyclically, as I was, clearing the top of some stuff, more stuff would come up from underneath that I had to address and clear. And there was this reoccurring pattern of that. And it took a tremendous amount of resilience. It took a lot of risking to be vulnerable, to be truthful, to allow another person to witness me feeling like an emotional baby inside at times. And
Mhm.
that's not easy to do, and not for me anyway. And um I was thinking about when the people would come into the treatment facility that I was working at, and how their defenses were up, and how hard I had to work at trying to break those down or build rapport, because they were protecting their vulnerability. And I remember myself saying to people over and over again, give yourself permission to be different, because there is an identity that you create when you have an addiction. Maybe it's like, oh, you're the guy that can drink anyone under the table. And there's a sense of pride and ego. And when you come to the bar, everybody raises their glass and goes, oh, so-and-so's here, you know, and you feel a sense of connection and belonging, but your life is completely falling apart. Your family's left, your children won't talk to you, your job is on the rocks, all of that's happening. And it's like now you're confronted with potentially having to get sober. And that means changing people, places, and things. You're no longer going to have that reputation. That's no longer going to be a part of your identity. And you're encouraged to join communities like, you know, 12-step fellowship groups, or, you know, other types of non 12-step fellowship groups that will be a new sense of community for you. But it's not the same, because it's really grounded in inner work and being honest and truthful, and not using smoke and mirrors to hide yourself from what you're really struggling with. So giving yourself permission to change is really important, and not judging yourself and not surrounding yourself, losing the relationship. Sometimes you had really close relationships with people you use substances with, and now you've got to let that go, and you guys really survived things, and maybe one person isn't willing to get well alongside with you. So there's this feeling you have of abandoning them when they were there for you when you were using with them. It's really complex, but I was thinking about all of these instances, and it really helped me saying, Sin, you got to push yourself to invite people in. You've got to push yourself to be honest, to let people be there for you, and to let them support you. And who cares if you don't understand it? Who cares? Because my whole life had a reputation of being the person that you go to that finds solutions. And I'm like, I can't even find myself out of a wet paper bag right now. And it's like, this is so different, you know? And I just wanted to hold on to that core sense of self. And it was just slipping through my fingers. And and not to give up. The other thing that I found myself saying to myself that was really important is the degree of effort that you have to put in the beginning, the way it weighs on you. So in recovery, you find that you're going to come in and it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort, and you're not going to see all the blessings of that right away.
Yeah.
You're going to put all the effort in just to get to bed sober or without using. And it's like you still don't have all the repaired relationships. You still don't have the confidence. You still don't have the perfect job or all the money in the bank that you lost. You don't have those things yet. And so it feels like you're putting in like 150% effort and you're getting scraps back. And I'm saying to them, that's normal. Hang in there. Don't quit. Don't quit. Stay there. You don't want to start over. Just hang in there. Link to your support one day at a time. You'll get there eventually. And when you become stabilized in this new norm, these new people, these new places, these new things, this new sense of self, it's not going to take the same effort because it's your norm. You've purged, you've let go. And what you're going to find is that here you are in this new frequency, in this new place where you're not having to put the effort, and all the blessings are there, and you're getting 150 back, and your new norm only requires you to do 60, like, because you're there, unless it's a challenging, unique situation. But I found myself trying to reassure myself over and over. So I saw a huge parallel between sobriety and recovery and getting well and going through shadow work and these dark nights of the soul and such. So if you have that experience, if you yourself are in recovery and you're watching this, or you know somebody and you're going through this, that is a place where you can find common ground in the feelings with the person you love that has a substance abuse issue. You know, you can have respect for the strength that it takes to get well and the imperfections of it, which is why we say progress, not perfection. And you can apply those slogans to the journey of spiritual ascension as well, from my perspective anyway. So I just wanted to offer that to everybody, just in case they would find it helpful.
I think a lot of the topics and the tips that you just gave will help so many people, even if they're not going through addiction and recovery. I mean, there's people that go through abuse There's people that go through challenging times with, high pressure from their family and high expectations, and you know, um, the people that have mental illness that are going through this and going through recovery as well. And I don't think there's a single person on the planet that doesn't have some challenge or wounding connected to them.
Right.
But I want people to also recognize that challenge is there to provide a lesson, but also an awareness of your own resilience and your own inner power. Because when you get to the other side of it, you wouldn't be able to understand your true power and your uniqueness and your ability to be so resilient and strong without going through some of these challenges. It's like it's giving you the proof you need to understand your power. Because sometimes if things are so easy and we become indifferent or lazy, and we don't necessarily have all the struggles, we don't necessarily understand how capable we are to be able to go through what we go through. And the human experience teaches us this. That's why we're here. So if you ask yourself, why does everybody have something? Why are we all going through something? So we all pick and choose before we get here. We have a menu of choices of things that we like to accomplish and go through, and challenges, particularly because they are all interlinked with other wounds and experiences and challenges from other lives. My guides always say one life is just a continuation of the last. And we're all here, and through every life you experience, you go through more and you learn more and you experience more, and it gets easier as you go. But I think with the information Cynthia just gave, whether you have addiction or not, is valuable information to help you through any challenge that you have. And I 100% agree. Some of us hold on to our challenges because we built up communities with other wounded people that are suffering through the same fate. And we don't want to let go of those relationships because they do help us through our survival. They do make us feel like we're not alone. They do help us feel like we're part of a group that will only understand us where other people have not understood us. So it's very difficult to change and outgrow that because there's a level of grief that we have to go through to be able to separate ourselves from those people that aren't willing to grow with us. So that's its own experience and own challenge within itself, a part of just changing who you are as an individual and having the courage to change through this ascension process. And I know, Jordan, that you've gone through your own experiences through changing and growth of your own wounding. Do you have any stories to tell with that?
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about just the journey in of itself, and I was thinking about who I was before versus who I am now. And I remember oftentimes hearing from folks the experiences that we came in with this lifetime to have, certain maybe traumas or just, again, difficult moments we chose. And I remember really struggling with that because I've been pretty honest. We had a tremendous amount of trauma, family dynamics, abuse, sexual assault, you name it, from a young age. And I remember that used to really trigger me quite a bit to hear that I chose this, because why would I choose all of this? Who in their right mind would choose all this suffering was what I used to tell myself all the time. And going through the process of the ascension, as I said, especially doing like the dark work, but I think regardless if you're doing the dark work or not, and everyone, I keep hearing the same story of like, you start to really look at yourself and examine yourself and your experiences in different ways. And I found the more that I became in alignment with my path, what I came down, the spiritual mission that me as a soul came down to do, I started looking at some of those experiences very differently. Similar to how I was talking about earlier with those transferable skills, I got transferable skills from some of those experiences. And I know I've talked about this before, but also it really supported in the work and in the journey, and being able to hold certain frequencies, empathize with folks who are going through similar experiences, whether that be earthbound or people in the physical. So I just want to say, even though you may have gone through something really challenging, and again, hearing that, okay, you as a soul may have chosen this, it's not uncommon for folks. I could say it's pretty common for folks to maybe have a little bit of resistance to that at some point, because why would we choose this? But I said the more on the journey I got, the better of an understanding I had. And the more I was able to look at that perspective of some of those experiences, and then looking at the work and looking at the way that my life went, there's an aspect of myself that's very compassionate for myself in those experiences that I went through. And I will always hold space for those parts of me that have struggled with that and continue to at points, because it's an ongoing journey. Healing never stops. But I also have a higher degree of understanding. And I can see now, as I've gone through, again, purging those layers, almost like to think of like the jawbreakers, like you've got all those tough outer layers, then you get to like the mushier center. As I've kind of gotten closer and closer to that mushier center, again, it's never ending. But as we're getting closer, I don't have the same association to those experiences, to those tougher outer layers. And what I find so beautiful about that is I can see from a higher vantage point where some of these experiences may have served me in my life path, my journey, again, the work that I've been able to do, how I've been able to show up for people, why I'm able to do certain types of work in the spiritual work, but also in the 3D as well. And despite all that, as I said earlier, there was a lot of resistance at points. And that's why I think we've all kind of talked about community. And I was thinking, Cynthia, how you were mentioning progress, not perfection. And Cynthia used to tell me that all the time because I was a perfectionist. We built up those walls, those perfectionism walls like Fort Knox. And sometimes during being that in-between stage, just being able to sit there and say, this is where I'm at today. And it's funny, Amy, because I used to tell clients all the time, who you are when you're 5 is very different than who you are when you're 30 and in your 20s. So it's interesting that those are the ages that you brought, because I used to tell that to clients all the time in their trauma healing, because it's very true. But Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to go through this journey overnight. It's going to take time. And it's that build and let go, build and let go. And it's as Cynthia, we always used to tell me, it's the progress, not the perfection. You can be messy in it, but give yourself some grace. Because I sure as hell had to give myself a lot of grace for parts of me that I didn't even want to identify with because they felt so foreign to me. But going through this ascension process, you really start to see all aspects of yourself. And, me doing a lot of the darky work, it's recognizing that everything has value and how we don't always have to like how certain things act and behave or how they respond or how they show up, but they do have value. And as much as through the spiritual journey, I noticed I would like to lean towards more the light and lovey stuff at points because it was more comfortable. I didn't want to look at some of the more darker aspects of myself. I will say that the true transformation came from, as Cynthia was saying, through like the addiction recovery work, was being honest with myself and being able to hold that and not judge those parts of me, because those parts were there for a reason, right? Whether it be through survival, whether it be through conditioning, certain aspects, certain identities, certain belief systems, certain values, had a purpose at one point. And so when you're able to give a little bit of love and compassion and hold space for those parts of you during those moments, even the parts that you don't want to acknowledge, even the parts that you don't want to look at, even the parts that you look and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I would even think that. And there's a lot of judgment towards that. Give yourself some grace, because none of us are perfect and there's value in everything. And when I started giving myself that narrative, there's value in everything. Let me just get curious about this. Let me try to understand it. Let me empathize with these aspects and parts of myself. I found the transition to go through this much more smooth, because I realized it was all those layers of identity that I had built up that I was holding on to, that it was also those layers of identity that was also judging other aspects of myself. And so I was able to step outside of myself a little bit more and give yourself that love and that compassion. And again, just getting curious, much more smoother. And I don't know if you ladies experienced any of that. That was just something I found was really helpful, and giving myself the grace to be messy. So one day, and knowing today is not going to be who I am tomorrow. And who I am tomorrow is not going to be who I am going to be in a year from now or 5 years from now. And kind of just being a leaf on the stream and going wherever you have to go, whether it be through the rapids, over a waterfall. But I got there faster.
Yeah.
But I also needed support, because going through those rapids and over those waterfalls and in all the murky water was challenging. So there's a lot of self-compassion and self-grace. But in the moments when I couldn't hold that for myself, I'm so grateful that I had these lovely ladies as well as other individuals in my life who could hold that for me and who could be that voice of reasoning at point. And that's what we talk about why community is so important, because it's not that you can't do it alone, but it's so much easier to do it with others.
Hmm. Yeah. Well said.
You're never really alone. You have your team and spirit helping you anyway, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I do have Anne with me already. I'm sure you guys can tell a shift here. So, and the one thing that she wanted me to say when you were speaking is to remind people that they are not their wounding. They are
Yes.
not their challenges. And that
Yes.
when we say we form our identity around our wounding, we do that in a way because it's a self-identity. It's a way for us to self-evaluate based on what we've been through. And she wants to remind people that we are more than just our wounding. We are more than just our challenges. We are so many different aspects of identity that shine at different times, that get focused on more at different times. If you look at, like the facets of a diamond, you can, sometimes we're concentrating on just one part of the diamond where there are many facets. There are many facets of the soul. There are many facets of our life experience. And to remember, just because you're focusing on it right now, which might be a few years, it doesn't mean that's all that you are. You are more than just that. So when you find that you are building your identity around your challenges and your wounding, you're limiting yourself based on a very small aspect of who you are. So try to step back from that self-evaluation identification to be able to say, I'm more than this. I am many forms of me. I am my child self. I am my adult self. I am a soul self. And I am a divine being experiencing this challenge. Try to step out of the challenge and recognize it as a tool for growth and change, not a tool for self-identity. So try to think of it that way instead. So I know we had a few questions and things that we wanted to ask, and so she's happy to be here and answer, and I will do my best to answer for her as well as she's shifting closer as well. So who would like to start with any question that you have? Jordan, did you have a question?
I do have one. So through the ascension process, we know we're integrating more of our higher self and into that third dimensional ego. I'm wondering, how do people, or if Anne has any suggestions on how people can navigate that a little bit more smoothly to either avoid as much of an identity crisis, or if that identity crisis comes up, as I feel like all of us have talked about, it inevitably does at some point. Does Anne have any suggestions or advice from a higher vantage point on how people can navigate that a little bit more smoothly? Or navigating the rough waters.
And it's interesting that you said rough waters, because she was showing me a flow of like a river. And she says you have to understand that your identity is layered upon layered upon layers.
Mm-hmm.
And as one layer sheds, another one will form in its place. Your merging into more of your higher self is true, but not exactly true. She's saying you're moving into a higher state of being, which is then becoming more of yourself, but then also becoming more one with all. So the whole feeling of being afraid to merge into more of your higher self is understandable, but it is the overwhelming feeling of merging into all that is, being closer to your, what we call God source, God self. Mm-hmm. And many people have a hard time with that because of their limited beliefs of themselves. They do not feel that they are capable of being more than all they are. And that what they need to do is slowly shed the disbelief and the illusion of of how they restrict themselves, their self-destruction, their limiting beliefs, their negative thoughts about themselves. So think less about who you are becoming and think more about what you need to let go of that no longer serves you, such as negative thoughts and emotions about yourself, because that anchors you into third dimension and it keeps you from understanding yourself as a divine being that is fully capable of anything. So she's talking about not worrying so much about becoming more your higher self, but becoming more one with all. That is actually more important in the whole scheme of things. She's saying it that the higher self is one with all, but it is also a limited version of that. They are saying they want us to evolve into more of the oneness, the connectiveness of the light, which we're actually evolving and ascending in fourth dimension. And our fourth dimensional beings are actually becoming more fifth and sixth dimensional beings in the astral world. So they're saying we're trying to catch up to that. So think less of becoming more of your higher self and more of becoming God. That is what she is saying. Become more of who you really are beyond the higher self, which is interesting, and feels less scary, to tell you the truth, because it feels more natural to think of that, because she's saying your higher self still carries an identity. And so the ego goes into a state of fear with change of identity. But if you merge more into the oneness, it doesn't have identity. It just has love. So it's less restricting, and there's less fear evolving into that state, because you feel completely supported in that frequency, and there's nothing that you can't be, and there's nothing wrong with you. Whereas moving into your higher self, which still has identity, there's still room of error and feeling of failure, whereas the oneness, that doesn't exist anymore. So it's a much easier transition to move into.
One of the things I'm thinking about as she's talking, and I'm not sure if this is correct, so correct me in this thinking, but I know that when we come here, we have this illusion of separation. There's a very heavy illusion of separation, whether it be my body's here, your body's there, my house is here, your house is there. So when you go through this ascension process and you're the lifting of that identity and merging into oneness, is that why we get that feeling sense of like losing ourselves? Is because we're actually detaching from this illusion of separation that we've come in with.
She's saying your mind creates the concept of losing yourself, whereas you're actually gaining more of yourself. There's no loss at all. You cannot lose anything, but rather it's changing yourself. So we need to get out of the analogy of loss and use more vocabulary such as changing and transitioning and becoming something else, a vibratory state of change. She says the illusion of separation was created for the self-identity, for you to walk in an individual identity, to be able to experience life, so God, Source, can understand through various identities, different perspectives. It was all orchestrated exactly the way it was supposed to be. And when you merge into that self-identity and oneness, or the individual self, it creates the illusion of separation. We are ascending, but we are not moving out of the self-identification of an individual. That is still required for the physical experience. We may feel more focused on community and more connectiveness, but in reality, when we feel more connected to things, and for the polarity of third dimension to still exist within our main frame, we will feel more of being the hermit. We will need self-isolation. We will need alone time. We will need feelings of being just one with everything in an isolated state, such as sitting in a forest or sitting at the beach, not surrounded by other people, but being in an alone state, connecting to all that is. This is a natural state to be in. We feel the urge to isolate only when we feel we're in that transitionary state where we're shedding and changing old identities, because we need to be able to do self-reflection. When we're in groups of other people. We reflect off of the reflection of others. We see ourselves and our identity through the eyes of others. When we want to be able to change and grow, we isolate ourselves from that reflection and go inward for our own self-soul reflection. So she says many people will be in various states where they want to be alone or they want to be in groups. It all depends on what the soul and the higher self need at that very moment.
Mm-hmm. I have a follow-up question, but it has to do with the story that Jordan shared, an aspect of it. What would she say about in response to why souls choose to go through horrible suffering that we on human level would call horrible suffering acts? Why would a soul choose that for themselves?
She is saying the soul doesn't necessarily choose it, but rather is it a consequence of the lesson. Suffering was never meant to be something the soul experienced, but rather something that evolved over time through the consequences and experiences of the challenges the soul came to face. She is saying suffering is very varied between souls. Some souls who've evolved past the desire for suffering can experience a lesson but not suffer, while other souls are still very much um, submerged in the desire for self-suffering because they're needing to purge that from their soul, so they feel the need and desire to be involved in that. We do not choose in the light to suffer. That is actually an illusion. That is not true. We choose to experience, and we understand some of the experiences will be hard to go through, but our emotional response is our choice. The emotional response is evolving. As souls, we are learning to evolve from deeper, darker, more negative emotional responses into higher frequency responses. The challenges do not change. They remain the same, such as circumstances that happen to you. But your response and your emotions and your expectations change, which change the soul out of state of suffering into more state of the evolved self, which is just understanding the lesson, and you understand it much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking about my conversations with people, and I would deal with multiple people who had similar thematic suffering or traumas. And some, it was just a matter of perspective. Some, it didn't imprint the same, but they
Yeah.
went through the same type of thing. And
Right.
so it kind of speaks a little bit to that. So for
Mhm.
me,
He's
I
saying that
understand it from that.
it is an illusion. It is something man-made, created to understand why we suffer. But the explanation of it is actually not true. They would say,
Mm,
why would you believe that we would want you to suffer? It is the opposite of what they want for us. They want us to grow, to love, to be compassionate and kind. Suffering is sometimes inevitable for those who are not able to see beyond their pain. And that's why angelics come down to help guide them through their suffering. They do that because they do not wish us to suffer. Suffering is never something they ever wanted us to experience. So they would like us to start changing what we're saying in the physical world, to say suffering is something that is required for growth. It is not true at all. The lesson is required for growth, but you can experience the lesson through various perspectives. And she keeps saying the evolved self does not need or does not desire suffering. It is not required and does not serve the evolved self anymore. The lessons do not change, though. Hardships come and go, but it is how it penetrates into you and how it consumes you, how it affects you and controls you. That is what we're trying to evolve out of. And she says, we're getting very close to that.
Just to speak on what she just said there, that hit so deeply because I remember a time when my life was falling apart and I kept going to my team and I'm like, what is this? They're like, you're learning a lesson. And I'm like, can I get this lesson in a different way where I'm not struggling as much because this is becoming too much? And they said, we'll think about it. Like we'll discuss it. Had to go to the higher ups, I guess. And then suddenly everything kind of fell apart. Things stabilized in my life. Everything was fine. And then months later, I was thinking about it. I'm like, hey, what happened to that lesson? Because that was chaos back there. Like, are we going to go back and do that? What is it? Because it's been smooth sailing since then. And my team came in and they went, you already learned the lesson. No, what do you mean? I had to go through all this struggle. And it's been smooth sailing. I haven't even thought about it. And y'all telling me I learned the lesson. They said, why do you think you have to learn through suffering? You can, as long as you learn the lesson, how you choose to interpret it is very different. And I was like, you mean I learned it? And they went, yeah, you learned it already a long time ago. And I went, damn, I want this more often. And they came in and they said, why don't you ask? And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm gonna offer that to all y'all. You can ask.
Somewhere along our evolutionary line of our existence as souls, she's saying, we developed the understanding, or we developed the belief that suffering was an expectation. Suffering was inevitable through the human experience. And we developed patterns, repetitive cycles of suffering. And that suffering then projected into the world, which created suffering on a global level. She's saying when we all stop believing that suffering is demanded and required, and that it is a choice, then we have the choice to change. Everything is choice. She's like, we give you free will for a reason.
Yeah.
Free will is expressed through every experience, the good and the bad. So once you start taking more control over your own experience, the less you will ever suffer.
I wanted to ask her one question, and then I want to hear if there's anything else she wants to say before we kind of move forward. But, for people who are watching that are going through this emotional purging, identity shifting, psychological process of ascension, is there one or two things that she would really advise in terms of taking into consideration that would help us with that process?
She said that was a lot. She says there are too many identities and personalities watching to have one answer.
Okay.
So she's going to give a general perspective.
Okay.
She said, first, step out of yourself just for a moment. And how you do this is step out of who you think you are, step out of your wounding, step out of your childhood, step out of your job, step out of your circumstances, and just be in a state of existing. Just for a moment, just a soul existing in a universe, not even just the earth, but just the universe. And just close your eyes for a moment and just imagine the solar system around you, and you're a star glowing in the solar system. This is your true identity. You are light shining in a vast array of mass, space, and time. However you choose to exist is completely up to you. Every step that you take going forward is, by divine law, your creation. And so when you step out of who you become, give yourself a chance to reevaluate. Are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Are you grateful? Are you loved? And do you love? And if you can say yes to all of those questions, then you're exactly where you need to be. If you can say no to some of those questions, then you need to reevaluate how you can get yourself to a place where those answers can be yes. Reevaluation is required throughout your life because you're in a constant state of change. So if you're continuing with the same patterns over and over again, reevaluation of your life and your existence and everything that you're doing at that moment is inevitable. You're going to reflect, you're going to think, you're going to feel, you're going to experience, because everything is telling you and navigating you where you go next. If you calm the mind, if you calm the heart, and just listen to your soul, you'll know exactly where you need to go. And do not fear the next steps. Do not fear the unknown. Think of it more as an adventure, that God has laid a path for you of unlimited potential. And if this path is before you and you can do anything, then think of all the wonderful things that you can achieve in and through your experience. So step out of fear, step into joy of your own experience and existence, and just wait and see what comes.
Thank you.
She does
there any-
have one more thing she wants to add.
That's what I was going to ask.
She knows before you're going to ask it. She says she knows that this analogy and this statement is thrown around a lot in the world, but there is very little understanding of what it actually means. When people say all you need is love, she said it's a wonderful song and it's a wonderful thought. But many people do not actually embrace it. Many people don't understand it. Many people don't know how to exist within it. What it means is all you need to be is love. Everything else will figure itself out. When we say all you need is love, that doesn't mean you need love from others. It doesn't mean you need love of family or from God. What it means is you need to exist in the consciousness of your love. And whatever that means to you, when you sit there and you think, how can I be love? Think of the words that come to your mind. Think of the emotions and feel the emotions that come to your heart. What does that truly mean for you to be love? And when you can think of it and when you can feel it, project that to the world. Be love. Because that is the state and the natural state of your existence. We feel we need love from others. We do not. What you need is just to exist in love, and you will have all that you need. You will never need anything more than just being love. Do not expect it from others, do not desire it from others, but you will receive it from others, because the more you can live in the existence of love, the more people will love you, because you will feel as if you have everything. And when you feel that you have everything, everything comes to you. It is just the natural law of existence. So all you need is love of self, of you, of your existence, and just be. And that's what she wants to leave with everyone.
We appreciate her time and her words and being willing to be with us today.
All right, she's starting to leave slowly.
So as Anne's kind of departing, there's a few things we wanted to offer. Like, you know, if this is something that you're going through, if you are struggling, if you're going through a hard time, you know, some of the things I want to remind you of is to, like Jordan had said, show yourself grace, be gentle with yourself. Okay. And, you know, I had this analogy come up when Anne was talking. And it was, think of it like this. If you're in a room and you've got like white walls, okay? So you're born, you're just a child, you're a baby, you're in this room and there's white walls. Well, you got a bunch of visitors. You got your parents, you have your siblings, and then you grow up and you've got friends who come over, teachers, employers, everybody's coming into your room and everybody's got an opinion and they write it on your wall. And you keep reading what everybody else has written, kind of going through the ascension process, like getting some primer and just rolling that and going, I don't have to live by the writing that's around me. These were put there by other people's opinions. They were put there from other people's perspectives. It doesn't have to be my truth. And so it comes back to giving yourself permission to change. It's like paint the walls and write what you want on there. And like Anne saying, focus on what you love. Focus on what makes you feel love, you know? And so be gentle with yourself, give yourself permission to change. Don't judge yourself. Jordan said that a number of times. Don't judge yourself for what you're going through and align yourself with people that aren't mirroring judgment back to you, and just really do your best to go with the tides of the experience and don't be afraid to ask for help, for sure.
Right.
I don't know if any of you want to offer any closing remarks.
Well, I think that through our discussion, many people have probably come to the awareness and realization that ascension is an individual journey. We all have our own challenges, traumas, fears, but you can see that ascension is moving past that. Ascension is expansion of our consciousness, but it's the elevation of our frequency. And the only way we can do that is to shed, change, and transmute our fears, which are quite often derived from other people. People make us afraid based on their judgments of us. And I love what Anne said about just exist in the frequency of love, because when you do exist in that, you no longer need the opinions of others. You no longer fear what people are going to think of you or what people are going to say, or, you're not going to feel afraid. You're not going to feel isolated or alone. You can't when you're in that vibration, because when she was saying it, she was making me feel it. And I literally felt one with everything. And when you're one with everything, you can't be without it. You cannot be alone. It is an internal journey of connecting back to one. And it's hard to explain until you feel it and you understand it. A big part of that is to let go of what doesn't serve you and to have the courage to be able to let go of what doesn't serve you. And the only reason you hold on to it is because you just don't know what else to expect or what else to do. And I always say, let go and let God. Because when you let go of what doesn't serve you, you can trust that all that you need will come to you at the right time. And when you're in that state of in between, just learn to love your existence in the now. Just be you right now, without worrying about your future, without being attached to your past. Just enjoy the moment. Everything will figure itself out. And you will ascend very easily when you follow your heart. There's nothing else to worry about. There's nothing else to do. Just let it flow for you when you love. So we had a lot that we discussed today, our own personal situations, our own growth, our own evolution, and our own ascension, which is continual. As long as we're here on the planet, we will always have more change come through. And it's going to happen. Be comfortable with change. Embrace change. And I love it. See it as an adventure. Like they're saying, life is an adventure. Life can be fun. Life can be joyful. Life can be exciting. It's whether you choose to let it be or not. And I always say, choose what makes you happy. always. So if you have any questions about anything we said or anything that Anne said, please send us your questions, and please send us questions that you would like to ask Anne yourself, whether it's through the topic of discussion or anything else that you would like to ask her. She has a wealth of knowledge. She is a teacher. And so if there's anything at all, feel free. Don't be afraid to ask. Because even if it doesn't relate to the topic we're discussing, we can save your question for another date when that topic does come up. So we love your questions because sometimes you can think of things that we can't.
Yeah.
And every perspective is valued here. So, and Cynthia, how can they reach us?
We have an email at spiritrescuetalk@gmail.com.
And we'd love to hear from all of you.
Connect with us.
Anyone? Yes. And again, thank you for joining us. We can't wait to see you next time.